Hello everyone, what's up? It's me again, Junkmaster3, and what do you know? Finally, I'm at this particular video, which I should have done like months ago, but this is going to be the Horrorthon video for 2023. So these are all the films that I watched during the Horrorthon, mainly whole horror movies, and I did watch most of them. I tried to watch as many movies that I had not seen before. And I did throw in some of those ones that I usually watch during Halloween or like during the horror month in general. So, but anyway, let's begin. And I'm gonna go through these chronologically, like the way I watched them. And I'm gonna talk a little bit about them, not too much, because I watched like 60 titles, and that's like I can't sit here all night and just talk about that. But so I'm gonna like talk a little bit more about the ones that are worth discussing, and a little bit less about the ones that I would just say is just mediocre or like just bad. But anyway, let's begin right away. The first one I watched was a film called Beasts from 1983. Now this is like a killer bear film. Um, I think it's a pretty nice little setup for the film, like these people like hiking out in the woods and whatnot, and there's like a big bear. It has very many similarities with Grizzly, which I would say is slightly better than this. I would say the main problem with this is some of the bad guys. I think they were really not well written. I thought they were really obnoxious and really annoying, and not well written at all. And the bear itself isn't really like the main antagonist in the film either. It's mainly like these like redneck people going around like blabbering and whatever. So it's kind of a mediocre film. I gave it a 5 out of 10. Now the next film I watched was a film I saw in the cinemas, and it's Saw X or Saw 10 or whatever you want to call it. It seems like people have already talked about this one to death, so I'm not going to go into too many details about this one, but I thought this was a very well written Saw film. Sometimes you just wonder, this is not really a big spoiler or anything, but obviously Tobin Bell is like the lead character in the film, and it's just so like not irritating, but it's just so interesting to just figure out like how the filmmakers are thinking about like resurrecting his character basically, because he's been dead since like part 3. So this, I believe, takes place between part 1 and 2, I believe. So it's still a very well written film. I mean, that fits into that time span, the Saw universe or whatever. So and I really like the motivations like behind his like the why he's killing people and whatnot. Even though it's not really he's not really the one that kills them off. It's basically themselves. But I mean, you can argue about that all day long. With like whatever you want to talk about that. But Saw X, great film. I give it an 8 out of 10. That's probably one of the better Saw films that have come out lately. I thought Jigsaw was kind of whatever, but it's still better than let's see, part 5, 6, and 7. I would say. Maybe a little bit better than Saw 4 as well, but not as good as the first 3 in my personal opinion. But still a good Saw film. So yeah, there you go. And then I watched a Japanese horror film from obviously horror film. Oh, it's just stupid. I watched a film called The Snake Girl and the Silver-Haired Witch, which is a very weird film. It's very weird to like describe it to someone that hasn't seen it, but it's like Japanese weirdness. It's from 1968, and yeah, just watch this for yourself without knowing anything about it. That's the best thing I would say, because I would say if you talk more about it, it's like a big spoiler like towards the end that I'm not gonna say anything about. But that was quite interesting, very creep as well. I'm not sure why, but I read somewhere that this particular film, was like more aimed towards children or like younger audiences. And I'm like, people would be terrified if they watched this like at that age or like at that young age. So at least I know I would. But really good film, 7 out of 10. Then I watched a film called It Happened at Nightmare Inn. Which one was that? I think that's a Spanish or Mexican horror film. I thought that was very mediocre. I only gave it a 5 out of 10. Didn't care too much for it. I'm just gonna move on. Then I watched a film about the Night Stalker Richard Ramirez, which is called The Night Stalker, from the early 2000s. And thank God this was not directed by Eli Lommel, because if it would have been that, it would have been very horrendous, because he's known for making really terrible like serial killer films. At least he did back in the early 2000s. But this one, I mean, this has a whole lot of like bad reputation and whatnot. I didn't think it was that bad. I think it was kind of mediocre, whatever. But it's not as bad as people make it out to be, in my personal opinion. But yeah, whatever. Yeah, Night Stalker there, number 5. Night Stalker from from 2002. Sorry. And then we have a film from the early 80s, which has a very hilarious title called Dance of the Dwarfs. And I'm gonna tell you right now, don't expect this to be like a film about dwarfs dancing around, because there's no dwarfs in the film. There are really weird creatures that are kind of small, but they're not dwarves. So I'm not really sure why they called it Dance of the Dwarfs to begin with. That sounds more like a weird musical to me. But this is a very strange and obscure horror film with Peter Fonda and Deborah Raffin. I think those two characters are the best part about the film, because it really felt like they went all in with their characters in this one. Like a jungle horror adventure like that. I'm not sure if this was ever released on DVD or Blu-ray. I'm not really certain, because I watched this on YouTube, and this seems to be very hard to come across, because I did come across a VHS copy of this that went for like 60 or 70 bucks. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna pay that. So yeah, but it's a fairly entertaining little film, so 6 out of 10. And then we have a film which was a big disappointment. I think the premise for this sounds very interesting, but it just fell flat for me. The Task from 2011. A bunch of annoying characters like taking place like they're like auditioning for some of this weird some sort of like game show, and like, oh, they need to stay in this haunted house or whatever, and then they'll get some money or whatever. Just the characters are just obnoxious, and this doesn't really happen anything into the last 20 minutes of the film. And at that point I had already given up. Yeah, and it's not really like a film that builds up like any atmosphere either. It's just flat out boring. So 4 out of 10 for The Task. Then I watched a very hilarious Bigfoot movie, or Sasquatch, or whatever you want to call it, but Shriek of the Mutilated from 1974. Now this film is actually pretty bad, but it has so many charming bits to it that it's like unintentionally funny. It's mainly this guy, obviously it's like an older film, and it's like gonna be like a guy in a suit or like in a costume. I thought that was very hilarious and really funny, and yeah, it's a really like weird, funny film that I don't think a whole lot of people like, but I liked it quite a lot. So 6 out of 10 still. Then I watched. Now this one I would love to get a hold of on DVD or Blu-ray, but yeah, DVD, because I know for certainty that Mondo Macabro released this on DVD and Blu-ray, and it goes for stupid, ridiculous prices. Then you might ask, why did you watch it? Well, I watched it on streaming, or like on YouTube or something. I'm not really sure what site it was, but The Queen of Black Magic from 1981. Great Filipino. Is this Filipino, or this could be Indonesian? I'm just gonna double check on that. Don't quote me on this before I've watched. Yeah, Indonesian. Yeah, not seen too many Indonesian films, but what do you know? I've actually watched 2 Indonesian. Is that Indonesian, that one as well? I'm just gonna double check. Yeah, Indonesia and Singapore. Apparently, the other one was from. But The Queen of Black Magic. It's basically about this lady that gets accused of something. I don't really remember, but the whole village is basically turned against her, and they just want to dump her off. So they pretty much just throw her off like some sort of cliff, and they obviously expect that she died, but she didn't, because she was like falling onto all these trees and right in front of like this old man that teaches her all about black magic and stuff. So most of the film is just her taking revenge on this like village that did her wrong. So really hilarious, really funny film with these like wacky special effects from the early 80s. If you've seen Mystics in Bali, this is very similar to that, in like the weird, wacky effects and whatnot. So yeah, The Queen of Black Magic I really enjoyed. 7 out of 10. Then another one which has been on my watch list. Sorry, I just can't speak. It's probably because it's so late in the evening. But Galaxy of Terror from 1981. This is a film that I really enjoyed, and I thought the cast was very amazing, like really great cast. A Roger Corman production, great creature effects. You could tell, well, like when it comes to some of those older Roger Corman productions, that they really put the budget where it really works, because they have a very small budget, but they're still able to make a very entertaining films. That's what I wanted to say. Yeah, Galaxy of Terror from 1981, a 7 out of 10. Then we have another weird, wacky film which I liked more than I expected. Don't Panic from 1987. Um, yeah, what to say about this one? This is another one of those films that have very like funny, unintentionally funny sequences, I believe. Because this should have been like a horror comedy of some sort, because there's so many scenes that I laughed out, like laughed at a whole lot. But yeah, 7 out of 10 for Don't Panic. Then we have the film called My Friends Need Killing from 1976. And this is another one of those films that takes place right after the Vietnam War, I believe. And this guy that gets back into society just goes nuts. The whole storyline reminds me a whole lot of the Bob Clark film. What was that film called? The Death Dream, I believe it was called. So it has a similar type of storyline to that. So, but I gave this a 6 out of 10. So yeah. Then we have another one of those that most people would probably say, "Oh, this is just garbage," and I do acknowledge that it is garbage. But for me personally, this was unintentionally funny garbage. There's a whole lot of those like films in this horrorthon or whatever. But Creature from Cannibal Creek from 2019. Um, just the fact that Brett Kelly makes a weird cameo appearance in this was very, very strange to see, because Brett Kelly is, according to me, one of the worst directors of all time. Um, I also would say like most of his films doesn't even have more than 2 on IMDb. On IMDb, sorry. But this is like a 5 out of 10 because it's so bad it's good in some ways. It's not like something that would rush out to rewatch, but yeah, whatever. Then we have a horror comedy from 1982, which was not funny or scary at all. That sounds strange because I usually don't watch horror films anymore to get scared. I just watch them for thrills, really. But anyway, the film is called Hysterical from 1982. Yeah, like I said, none of the horror elements their horror elements didn't work, and the comedy didn't work. This was just flat out boring. I mean, that's really like the worst thing when you have like a horror comedy and it's not funny at all. I mean, you can have like a bad horror film that you can kind of laugh at, but if it's like intentionally like a horror comedy and you just don't laugh at it, it's just why even bother? So yeah, 3 out of 10 for Hysterical. Then we have another weird, strange film. This was like a film that kind of looked like it was made in the 70s, but shockingly, this was made in the late 90s. And the film is called The Desecration from 1991. Not 1991, 1999, sorry. I believe this is like an Italian production or like an Italian film, but I believe it was like made in English. Like all the actors, I believe, were Americans. I believe. I'm not really sure. It was so a while since I like watched these films now, so sorry for that. But Desecration, 6 out of 10. And then I watched. Oh boy, this might have been one of the worst ones that I've watched during the Horrorthon. Killer Eye, Halloween Haunt from 2011. Now this is like a sequel to the late 90s horror film Evil Eye. Not Evil Eye, Killer Eye, sorry. And I believe that one was directed by David Akoda, I believe, who is most famous for making some of those atrocious like shirtless dudes films. I mean, you just have to look him up if you don't believe me. But this one is directed by Charles Band, and this feels like if you imagine like Silent Night, Deadly Night 2, you have like a bunch of footage from the original film. I would say like 70 or 75% of this film is just the first one, because the characters in this are watching the original film on TV or like on the TV screen or whatever. And like, why even make this film? Just scrap it. So yeah, that was a 2 out of 10 for me for that one. Then I watched a very strange made-for-TV horror film from 1999 called Primal Force. And the only way I'm going to describe this one is imagine Ron Perlman battling like mutant baboons. There you have it. That's the that's the synopsis of the film basically. So, but anyway, Primal Force, that was a 5 out of 10. Could have been a good film, but it was like lacking in some parts, I would say. So yeah. Then we have another one which I've been really wanting to see for such a long time, and then I could have swore this was like a Hammer film production, or like a Hammer film, but apparently not. This was an American production, but the film is called The Dunwich Horror from 1970. I believe this is based on a story by H.P. Lovecraft, if I'm not completely wrong, but very strange, very like experimental in a way, like the way it was shot and like all of the weird like colors in the film. That was quite interesting to see for a film that was made that long ago. So yeah, Dunwich Horror, I would still say it's a 6 out of 10. But then I watched. This might have been spoilers. This might have been the best one I watched all Horrorthon. Macabre from 2009, not to be confused with Macabre from the early 80s by Lamberto Bava. This is the Indonesian one that I referred to before, or Indonesian or Singapore or co-production or whatever. Um, yeah, this film, this is kind of reminding me a little bit of like Hostel in a way, um, because it's like about these people that gets like lured into this big house or like mansion, and they don't know really what's going on. And obviously, this family where is just absolutely twisted and really like screwed up. Um, but yeah, lots of blood, lots of gore effects. I mean, the blood and gore effects in this is just top notch, and I'm sort of a gore hound, so I really love those type of films that really um, really like do practical effects really well. And I would say this one is a category in that. So yeah, Macabre from 2009, 9 out of 10. Sorry, lots of nines there. Then we have this is the is this part 6, I believe, in that franchise. I mean, there have been so many films in this particular franchise now, but Amityville 1992, It's About Time. This is basically the same storyline as the is as part 4, I believe, but instead of a lamp, it's a clock this time around. Uh, Hence the title, It's About Time. I used to imagine like it's about time we end this franchise. This is very mediocre, very like whatever. Like I wouldn't say that I hated it. I didn't say like I liked it either. It was like whatever, mediocre, 5 out of 10. Then I watched an anthology film from 1989 called After Midnight. Um, One thing that I really appreciate with some anthologies is when they don't have too many stories, because that's my biggest concern with the original Creepshow. I think Creepshow is a good film, but I feel it's way too long and it has way too many stories. I mean, I would settle with like 3 stories and maybe like one wraparound story, and that's it. This one was, I believe, was slightly shorter than Creepshow as well. So maybe that's another plus why I like this one. I mean, I wouldn't say this is as good as Creepshow, but it's still a fairly entertaining like anthology film. So 6 out of 10. Then we have a film called The Fan, not to be confused with The Fan from like the 90s, which is some sort of like crime drama thriller film, I believe. This is from 1981 with Lauren Bacall, and she plays like this really like wealthy like actress, and eventually she gets like a stalker after her, and it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And yeah, I'm just gonna leave it at that. So yeah, really entertaining film, really great performances as well. So 7 out of 10 for that one. And then this one I'm not gonna mention. I'm just gonna mention this because I've already seen this one before. So this is basically a rewatch. But the Abominable Dr. Phibes from 1971 with Vincent Price, one of his best roles in my personal opinion. Maybe not his best. I mean, my personal favorite is probably still Witchfinder General and House on Haunted Hill, I believe. But this one is still really a good like Vincent Price film. So yeah, there you go. I'm not gonna say anything else because I've already seen that one before, so it's a rewatch. Then I watched a film which I was very disappointed by. I wouldn't say that I hated it. It's still an all right film, but I don't understand the whole hype behind it. Hereditary from 2018 by Ari Aster. I'm still planning on maybe like watching like his other film, Midsummer, at some point. But after this one, it was like, oh, whatever. And my friend had told me like, oh, if you didn't like Hereditary that very much, you were gonna despise Midsummer. So it's just like it's really frustrating to me because there's so many films that are overhyped that are just like you just get disappointed. And even though I waited like a whole lot of years before watching this, it's still like I don't really get the whole point as to why people would say, oh, this is an amazing horror film. It's still a good film, don't get me wrong, but it's not that good in my personal opinion. But yeah, whatever. 6 out of 10 for that one. Then we have a film called Ghost Game, and I believe this is a film from Thailand. Um, Interesting premise. Is basically about these people that gets into this area or like facilities. Like there's like small huts out in the middle of nowhere, like in a jungle, and there's like a big fence around it. And it's basically about these people that tries to stay the night, or like stay, I think there's several nights, and survive in there, because it's like basically like haunted, because there's a bunch of ghosts or demons or whatever in that place. So some people chicken out and some people stay, so it gets worse and worse and worse. So yeah, there you go. Ghost Game, 6 out of 10. Still entertaining. Then I watched a film which was originally called, shockingly, this was originally called Friday the 13th. And this actually came out 1 year before Friday the 13th by Sean S. Cunningham. So I believe Sean S. Cunningham had to contact the people who made this film if he could use like that title, because now I believe this one is known as The Orphan. And this is from 1979, and what a boring mess. Don't even bother. I'm just going to leave it at that. So 3 out of 10. Then I watched Spectres from 1987 with Donald Pleasence, among others. I mean, Donald Pleasence doesn't really have the main role in the film, but it's about like these people getting stuck in like some sort of like cave system or something, like in, I believe it's somewhere in like South America. I'm not really sure. And obviously like crazy things start to happen, like ghosts or like demons or like some sort of creatures. I'm not really sure how to define them, but yeah, whatever. 5 out of 10. Then we have a film called Spiral from 1998. Now this is a Japanese horror film, and I believe this is supposed to be some sort. I think there's some sort of connection between this one and Ringu, because I think they came out around the same time, and some of the same actors, not all of them, but some of the same actors appear in this one and in Ringu. For some reason, Ringu got to be like one of the most popular films coming out, like horror films coming out from Japan at the time, and this one just fell into obscurity, which I think is a shame, because I think this is a really good film. But don't get me wrong, I still think Ringu is the far superior film. But I just wish that more people could discover this particular one. So yeah, Spiral from 1998. Now I really need to speed up because I've been talking for 22 minutes. Then we have Empire of the Ants from 1977 by Burt I. Gordon. Rest in peace. Passed away last year. He got to be 100 years old. I really appreciated some of his films. And some of his films are really tricky to come across, but I was really lucky to get a hold of the Code Red release of this film. But yeah, Empire of the Ants from 1977. Great spider creature feature film. I mean, if you kind of like ignore some of the like wacky, stupid like practical effects in this one, or like the digital effects, so to say, this is a very entertaining film. So yeah, there you go, Empire of the Ants from 1977, 6 out of 10. And then I watched another one which I really appreciated more than I thought I would. Ghost in the Machine from 1993. This has Karen Ellen in it, the actress from, I think she's most famous for the Indiana Jones films, like the original one and part 4, I believe. I'm not even sure if she appeared in like the latest one, but I don't really care about that one. But now this one is directed by Rachel Talalay. I probably pronounced her name really wrong, but she was the director who directed Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, which I think most people would say is like the weakest one in the Elm Street series. But don't let that fool you, because this is a very entertaining film. Maybe like some of the effects are really horrendous, but if you like if you look past that, it's a really entertaining film. So yeah, 6 out of 10. Then we have a this is a slasher film from the early 90s, which I have always wanted to see. I would say this is kind of mediocre, didn't really live up to my expectations, but The Disturbance from 1990. Typical slasher film, not really anything special. I wouldn't say I liked it either that much, because I think the death scenes were kind of lackluster, but yeah, hey-hi-ho. That was a 5 out of 10, by the way. Then we have a film called Maniacal from 2003. Sort of like, kind of looks like brain damage garbage, really. It's good for what it is. It's like super low budget, but they did the best with what they could, because they had some really good, well, not really good, but pretty decent like blood and gore effects. So yeah, this is basically like the Halloween story again. Like some lunatic escapes from like a mental asylum and goes on a killing rampage. There you go. That's the storyline. So yeah, 5 out of 10 for that one. Then we have another anthology film which I was really disappointed by, mainly because none of the characters are likable in any way at all. Bad Candy from 2020. Also, I would say it's too long as well. I would say, and it has like so many like after credit sequences. I believe as well. I think this was the one. But yeah, Bad Candy from 2020. 4 out of 10. Didn't care for it. Then we have a film which I quite enjoyed. This is another one which I believe is quite like low budget. Pool Party Massacre from 2017. Uh, and some of the thing about this one is that most of the characters are really obnoxious and really annoying, but it just makes it all the more satisfying because they get pretty cool death scenes. One of the biggest issues I have with this film is the twist towards the end, which doesn't make any sense at all. That really like threw me off in a way, in a very strange way. But yeah, Pool Party Massacre from 2017, 6 out of 10. Then we have a film from 1964 called The Devil Doll. Um, I wouldn't say that I would recommend this one. Had potential to be good, but it was just boring and lackluster. Don't get me wrong, the doll itself is very creepy and quite terrifying to look at, but I just wish that the doll was put into a better film. So yeah, 4 out of 10 for that one. Now the next one is another slasher film, and this is another one of those shot on video films. This is so strange and so weird, and it's the editing in this film is just so bizarre, and maybe that's the reason that kept me like interested in this film. Like, what's going to happen next? The Lost Slumber Party from 1988. Don't get me wrong, it's a really bad film, but some of the weird editing and like the strange like decisions from like the like characters really made me laugh. That's the reason why I didn't give it like a really. I mean, that's the reason why I didn't give it a 1 or a 2 out of 10. But this is a 3 out of 10. So yeah. Then we have a very mediocre slasher film from 1985 called Force of Darkness. If you could even consider like a slasher film, because you kind of know from the get go who the killer is, but um, oh, it's such a shame because this film takes place like on Alcatraz most of the time, and I don't think there's ever been a horror film made in Alcatraz that has been really really good. So I really wish someone could make some sort of horror film and like some kind of premise in Alcatraz and like a horror themed horror film to be a really good film. So yeah, 5 out of 10 for that one. Very mediocre. Then I watched a film called Vultures from 1984. Don't bother. 3 out of 10. I'm just gonna move on because I really need to speed up. Then we have Rising Boas in a Girls' School from 2022. Now this is a Hong Kong or like Chinese production. Really wacky, stupid, hilarious, fun. 6 out of 10. I'm gonna leave it at that. Then we have a film from 1978 called The Die Sister Die. Very boring, very like uninteresting storyline. Yeah, 4 out of 10 for that one. And then we continue with another one which was very like lackluster. Lurkers from 1987. Yeah, that's another 4 out of 10. I don't recommend that one. Then we have Random Acts of Violence from 2019, which I would say is a good film, but I think the reason why I liked it so much was because of the premise itself, which was quite unique. I'm not going to tell you anything about the premise, but it was quite unique and quite interesting, and that's the reason why I gave it quite a high rating, so 7 out of 10. Then I watched a killer creature, like killer animal film called Swarmed from 2005, and this is a made-for-TV horror film. And if you couldn't guess by the title, it's with like wasps, like killer wasps, like killing people off. Terrible effects, like you could expect from a made-for-TV film, but that's sort of kind of a charm as well. So 5 out of 10. Then I rewatched Pumpkinhead, the original one. Yeah, I'm just gonna leave it at that. One of my favorite like creature features of all time. So yeah. Then we have the next following two films I've already talked about, I believe, with my Halloween ranking video. Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends. Both of them, in my personal opinion, is of like 5 out of 10 on both of them. The storyline in the last one is really like lackluster and quite stupid, because it doesn't make any sense. Like this kid is like trying to beat up Michael Myers and kind of succeeding at it. Like, how did that even happen? Because like the spoiler alert, by the way, like you can probably tell, like in the end of Halloween Kills, there's like a big mob or whatever trying to kill him off once and for all, and they didn't even succeed with that. And for some weird reason, one kid in the next one is able to like kind of almost killing off like Michael Myers at some point. I'm like, why and how? Because not a big mob couldn't kill him off. Why would a teenage kid do that? Not saying he's a teenage kid, but you get what I mean. So yeah, 5 out of 10 for both of those. And then I watched this one just because I could. Now this is a film that is infamous for being really, really bad, but I decided to watch it anyway. Robot Monster from 1953. It's hilarious. It's still a bad film, 3 out of 10. But some of the sequences with that gorilla on the gorilla suit and the Cyclops or whatever you want to call it, that was really, or like fish. What's it called? The Cyclops, yeah, whatever. You know what I'm talking about. 3 out of 10 for that one. And then we have Last Night in Soho from 2021. Not as good as I expected it to be, but still a good film. 7 out of 10. I was going to leave it at that. Then we have a film called Maya from 1989, directed by the same guy who did Spectres, and I believe this was the last horror film he ever made. This is also kind of a mess, and I would say it's a little bit too long for its own good, but still, it's like whatever, 5 out of 10. And then we continue with the same type of story, kind of the same storyline in a way, but The Hell's Gate from 1989 by Umberto Lenzi. Kind of mediocre. It's acceptable, 5 out of 10. Then we have The Sleeping Car from 1990. Now this is a film that is very hard to come across, and I just kind of wish that I could have got a hold of like another version of this, because the version I watched was obviously like cut to pieces because they cut out some of the like gore effects or like the blood effects, and that's just such a shame. But yeah, it's a 6 out of 10 nonetheless. Then we have a film called Family Reunion from 1989, 4 out of 10. Terrible slasher film, didn't care for it. Then we have a really entertaining one called Satanico Pandemonium from 1975, a non-exploitation wackiness. 6 out of 10 for that one. Then we have The Depraved from 2011. I believe this is called as something else. I'm not really sure, but this kind of reminded me of Wolf Creek. If you mix Wolf Creek and the film Creep, the Creep from the early 2000s, you kind of get this film. I thought that was a really interesting like storyline and whatever, and the main like bad guy in this is just really horrendous, like he should be in the film, if you get what I mean. So yeah, 8 out of 10, really entertaining. Then it was time for Bad Channels from 1992. Full Moon garbage at its worst. 3 out of 10. Didn't care for that one. Then we have Monster from Green Hell. Charming, stupid, like monster film from the 50s. Some of those are really charming in a way, in my personal opinion. So, 5 out of 10. Then we have a film called The Zombie Chronicles from 2001. And this is directed by the guy who made Camp Blood. So if you've seen that film, you probably know what you're in for. Really low budget garbage. Didn't care too much for that one. 4 out of 10. And then we have a film called Psychic Killer from 1975. I've always wanted to see this ever since I saw it I think they mentioned this in the Studio S program in the early 80s in like Sweden, when they were talking about banning films, like violent films and whatever. So it's kind of like the video nasties of Sweden, based, so to say. But it's an entertaining film for what it is. So 6 out of 10. The last couple of free films I'm just going to mention really fast because I've already watched them before. These are rewatches that I usually watch during Halloween, but Night of the Demons from 1988, Fright Night from 1985, and Pumpkinhead 2 Blood Wings from 1993. Now Pumpkinhead 2 I don't usually watch around like horror during like October or whatever, but I just threw it in there. So yeah. So out of all of these, which are my favorite ones? My top 5 of the month, so to say, about among these Horrorthon videos, or like the Horrorthon videos, Horrorthon movies. Top 5 would be Don't Panic at number 5, The Queen of Black Magic at number 4, The Depraved at number 3, Saw X at number 2, and Macabre at number 1. So yeah. And if you're interested in any of these films, if you want to know more about them, I can leave a link down below in the description to the IMDb page for like the Horrorthon list. So now I'm probably gonna try to make top 5 of the month for November and top 5 of the month of December, and then I also need to make the video for the top 10 best films and top 10 worst films that I've watched during 2023. So keep your eyes open for these videos, and see you next time. Bye bye.